Hi, Simon Jarrett here, and this is Licks, Tips and Tricks number 2, so LTT2. So today I thought I'd talk a little bit about soloing over a one-chord vamp. In this particular case, a G7 chord. Now, I'm just going to get straight to it, and I'm not going to go through a bunch of theory and stuff like that in too much detail. Basically, when we're playing over a dominant 7th chord, I'm thinking kind of like a bluesy kind of thing. And there are various things that we can choose to play over a bluesy groove over a G7. The obvious choice is the minor pentatonic scale. And another popular choice would be the major pentatonic scale. So those are two very popular choices in rock, blues, country, many styles. And each of them has a particular set of intervals associated with that scale. So the minor pentatonic is a root, a flat third, a fourth, a fifth, and a flat 7. That's basically the scale, 5 notes, pentatonic. Now the major pentatonic is a root, a second, a root, a second, a third, a fifth, and a sixth. So, interesting things about both of them. The minor pentatonic, of course, it has a flat third in it, which gives us that bluesy sound, even though the G7 chord has a natural third. So the notes in the G7 are G, B, D, and F. That's a root third, fifth, and flat 7. So the minor pentatonic, it doesn't have that natural third in it. It has a flat third. So you could think of that as being a clash, or you could think of it as just giving it a sort of richer, bluesier flavour. You've got that. That kind of blues sound. Now the major pentatonic has that natural third. It also has the fifth. It has the fifth, but it has the sixth and the 2 and the second. So, some cool sounds there, but it's a little bit plain Jane. What's nice is when you combine the two scales and you get the sort of bluesiness of the minor pentatonic and some of the cooler sounds of the major pentatonic, like the sixth and the second. I like to think of everything in terms of intervals, because the intervals are like the colours we have to play with. So, if we think about the minor pentatonic, and the major pentatonic, if we combine those a little bit, that's kind of when the fun happens. And if you think about it, at that point, you've got all these different notes. You've actually got like a root, a second, a flat third, a third. You've got a fourth, you've got a fifth, you've got a sixth, you've got a flat 7. Pretty much what you end up having actually is another scale. It's called the mixed Lydian scale. You have a mixed Lydian scale, but also with the addition of the flat third. So the mixed Lydian scale is a root, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and a flat 7. It's a lot of notes to choose between. 7 notes. It's a mode, of course. The mixed Lydian is the 5th mode of the major scale. So G mixed Lydian is actually the same as the C major scale, but starting on the note G. And it's a perfect match for a G7 chord. All of the notes of the G7 chord are found within the mixed Lydian scale, unlike the minor pentatonic or even the major pentatonic. Neither of those scales contain all of the notes of the G7 chord. So obviously the G mixed Lydian is a natural choice. But if you want to make it sound bluesy, it's nice to incorporate that flat third. and maybe also the flat fifth, which is very popular in the blues as well. So the flat third and the flat fifth. So we can combine all these notes. Now it's starting to get a bit confusing. We've got all these scales, we've got all these notes. So really what we need to do is stop worrying about the names of the scales and just think in terms of phrases and sounds that we want to hear. If you're not familiar with these scales and mixing them all together, you of course might want to start simple and practice the minor pentatonic, practice the major pentatonic, maybe practice the Mixolydian, and then gradually try combining them. But when I'm soloing, I'm trying not to worry about the names of these scales. I'm really trying to think in terms of like the sounds, and the sounds for me are just intervals. So, for example, if I've got a G7 chord, so I'm sliding into the natural 6, which has a cool sound, and then playing some minor pentatonic. So you're sort of mixing a bit of the major sound and the minor pentatonic sound. So all of these sounds and licks and ideas are just sort of a mixture of these notes, and you've got to kind of come up with these phrases and start to hear what you like the sound of and try to figure out where to go for those sounds. So maybe I'll set up a little groove with the G7 chord here and then try to demonstrate some of this. Major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, maybe now dip in and out of some of these sounds, so maybe the minor pentatonic, but perhaps introduce the natural 6. Maybe the natural 2 as well, so we've got the 6 and the 2. So, one thing that's important, of course, is to try not to kind of just play a whole bunch of eighth notes and try to string things together kind of like in a stream of sort of verbal diarrhea, if you like. And I'm as guilty as anybody. Many guitar players do this, myself included. It's a good idea to slow down and just kind of let a little bit of space go and try to think about what you're going to play next. So listen to what you just played and then leave a little space, and that'll give you time to think and react, kind of like question answer kind of thing. So let's try to do that a little bit. So maybe you play something simple like, and then you stop a minute and you just let it pass and let the groove go, and then you think about what would sound good next. So maybe, yeah, something like that. So sometimes what you can do when you're playing over a one chord vamp is you can experiment more and do a wider range of scales or different sounds that you can dip in and out of, because it's only one chord, so it gets a little bit it gets easy to run out of ideas and you become less interesting. So what you could do is you could start off playing sort of pretty much in the box minor, major, pentatonic, bluesy sounds, and then as it builds or as time goes on, you might dip in and out of some more exotic sounds. You could also do things like you could insinuate chord changes which aren't actually there. So even though it's a G7, what I could do is I could think maybe 1.5 bars of G7, and in the second half of the second bar, maybe I'll pretend I'm playing, say, over a D7, so it becomes a 5-1, and on that D7 I can then think of some different notes to play with that D7, which would sort of set up a real strong resolution back to the G. So just in the last two beats, I'm thinking D7, or perhaps A flat 7, which is the flat 5 sub of D7. So you've got like, or I lied, it's 3 bars of G7 and 1 bar of the A flat 7 or the D7. Yeah. So even though those chord changes might not be played by a rhythm section, you can imply them in your playing. And for a second there, it'll be like, ooh, what's that? But it'll resolve if you come back into the G7 sound. So that's a nice trick to play. And in fact, a lot of people, like if you get into jazz and stuff, they talk about playing outside. Another way of thinking about playing outside is you could just imagine that you're actually playing over different changes than are actually there. So you set up this sound which maybe sounds a little bit outside of the tonality that people are expecting. But really, you're just following different changes. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but that's about the only way my brain can figure out how to do it. Just think of other changes and play those changes even though the rhythm section isn't playing them. As long as you bring them back in. How much you do this, when and where and how much, of course, is a subjective thing. It's a matter of taste. Alright, so I'll try to bring in some of those D7 sounds or the A flat 7 sounds. So I'll try to set up a little kind of a pad behind here and solo over that. It's a mixed Lydian kind of sound. So if you played the mixed Lydian, it's nice to occasionally hit that flat third to bring it back to bluesland a bit. Also, you can use chromatic passing notes, so everybody sort of, it's typical to end on the root, but maybe we could target the flat 7, which is here, so I'll go to end of phrase. Or, of course. Targeting these chord tones is a nice thing to do, so I can target the root, the third, the fifth, the flat 7. And I could land straight on those notes, or I could maybe approach them from below chromatically, or above by chromatically or by a step. So for example, the 7, I could bend into it. So it's very much a G7 sound, but I'm bending into the 7. So there I'm targeting the 5th from below and above. Alright, so here's the lick for the day, and it's sort of a mixed Lydian / Lydian flat 7 lick. There it goes. Another thing you can do over a G7 is you can play the half-whole scale, and that's also known as the diminished scale, although the diminished scale is actually really the whole half scale. So the half-whole scale starting on G it's a bit tense because you've got that flat 9 in there. Usually we would reserve this scale for, say, a 5 chord when it's going to resolve to a 1. But if we put it right on the 1 chord, it's a little bit tenser, but it's kind of a cool sound. Now the nice thing about the diminished is it's a symmetrical scale, so you can move it up and down in minor thirds. So if I have a lick, you can move up and down the neck in flat third intervals, or 3 frets at a time. The obvious thing is, we all know this from like little diminished chords, like you might go, say. But you can apply it to the scale too. And you don't have to apply it to the whole scale, you can just take a fragment of the scale. And then go back into the blues scale. Let's see what else. So that lick, it's a diminished lick, but it's not quite as tense because I never hit the flat 9. It's obviously a bit of a sore note if you land on that in the blues kind of thing. But that's all within the blues kind of sound. So minor pentatonic. major pentatonic, minor and major, mixed Lydian, almost the same thing, Lydian flat 7, half whole, So in LTT number 1, I demonstrated a little bit the effect of using a smaller tone capacitor in your guitar. I was using my Stratocaster, and I used a .0022 tone cap, which is much smaller than usual, and it had the effect of rolling off the top end but leaving the mid-range intact. So the effect from full open to turned right down was much less drastic, and it just smoothly took off the top end. Now, it's interesting to play around with the value of the tone cap. And so what I've done now is I've made a little box. I've called it the Scullion, and it has 9 different tone cap selections inside it. It has a tone pot, which is a 500 Ka, just like the tone pot in a guitar. And then it also has a volume, just so you can boost it just a smidge. Because sometimes if you roll a lot of the tone off, you lose a little bit of volume, so you can bring back the volume a touch with that. Now, I'll turn it off, and we'll just listen to the guitar wide open here. So, mini humbuckers, quite a bright guitar. Now, what we'll do is I'll select the to show you the range of caps and the biggest effect. I'll just turn the tone pot right off. So this will be like having the tone on your guitar turned right off. And we'll start with the biggest cap and cycle through the different sounds. So it'll be very muddy. Neck pickup. That's a massive cap. That's a 0.3 microfarad. 0.2. 0.1. This is a 0.047. Neck pickup. Bridge. This is a 0.033. Neck. Bridge. 0.022, very common value in a lot of guitars. Getting kind of squawky, almost like a cocked wah effect. 0.01. .0047. .0022, which is the value I used in the first video. So this very small value, 0.0022, is nice for taking off just the treble sheen on top and leaving the mid-range intact. Without Of course, I've got the tone pot rolled down to 0, so it's still, a very noticeable effect. We can raise it up a little bit and get something in between. So let's go for a bit more dirt here. So it's pretty bitey there with these mini humbuckers. So let's see, that's a fairly common value of 0.1, okay? Now, here's the best way to get the most out of 50s wiring. Dark, with the tone rolled right off. Might be nice for kind of woman tone sort of thing. But now listen to what happens when I roll up the tone. The trick is to find a spot just where it starts to open up and give you clarity. My guitar's still at maximum volume, but now watch what happens when I roll back my volume. So, wide open. Neck pickup. So it's kind of nice because you can go to the bridge pickup and get a nice thick sound, taking a little bit of the spike off, and then you can go to the neck pickup and get a fairly clear rhythm sound. If I try to do the same with the guitar stock, so again I roll the tone down a little bit here, and then try to clean up on the guitar. You can hear how the neck tone is very murky as I roll down the volume. Whereas on the scullion, so just a quick note to say that this video is getting really long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide it up into, or even more parts. The whole talk about 50s wiring versus modern wiring, and really demonstrating properly the different effects of using different tone capacitors in your guitar is quite a big subject, and it's an interesting one, or at least I think it is. So I'm going to do more on it, and this video here will just be a brief introduction to the idea of the scullion and being able to try different tone capacitors. I'll also mention briefly that when you plug your guitar into this pedal, it effectively gives your guitar 50s wiring. 50s wiring is how old Gibsons used to be wired, I guess, back in the 50s, and the tone circuit was actually wired to pin 2 of the volume pot. In modern wiring, The tone circuit is wired to pin 1. That's basically the only difference. But it has some pretty drastic implications, especially when you roll your tone down and then roll your volume down on the guitar. So it turned out to be a bit of a big conversation, an interesting one, and I'd like to spread it out over a few different episodes. So this is just a quick introduction with a couple of sound samples and more to come. Thanks very much.